To my Muslim friends, Assalamu alaikum. To Christian friends, peace be with you. They both mean the same thing, as it happens. To everyone in general, welcome. Mr. Deedat spoke, and of course he said some things that Christians probably don't like to hear. Not necessarily because they're not true things. I mean, it is true that many of the bishops of the Church of England have said Jesus is not divine. That's a fact. They have said that. What is annoying to many Christians is to say, how could a man who calls himself a Christian say that? In any case, I too will say some things that will annoy people, some things that maybe Muslims don't want to hear, some things that maybe Christians don't want to hear. But ask yourself, is it because it wasn't true, or why does it bother me if you don't like to hear what I've said? As my friend has said, we just got into a discussion. I met him for the first time, I believe it was only yesterday. We found out that we did at one time live within a few hundred miles of each other in Canada for a period of about 6 or 8 years, but unless I bumped into him on the street, I don't remember ever meeting him until yesterday. He said that he went from Catholicism into Islam. I went from Catholicism toward the Protestant churches. Now, I have to clarify, though, first, don't misunderstand where we're going. I didn't come here at the invitation of a church. Mr. Deedat asked me to come here. Didn't pay me to come here. A couple days after I got here, I asked him, who's paying for this trip? He said, we can't afford it. All right, that's the end of that. So nobody paid me to come here. I am invited from time to time to speak in churches, and sometimes I speak in mosques, and most often I simply speak at universities in open forums. You see, a lot of churches like what I say, and a lot of churches don't like what I say. Recently I was speaking in Vancouver on the west coast of Canada, and when I finished my speech, somebody came up and told me how horrible it was. He said as a Christian, he was very offended by what he heard, and he was very upset. And another man right behind him came up, and he was a minister in the United Church of Canada. That's the largest denomination in Canada. He shook my hand. He said, that was beautiful. I want your name and address. I liked what you said. So you see, you can't ever paint all Christians with one brush. They come from one extreme to the other. Any two differences you can think of, there'll be people in between those two extremes. So please understand, some churches appreciate what I say, some do not. To clarify some terminology, I was surprised to find this morning I looked in the newspaper talking about things going on in the city today, and it said Gary Miller is going to be speaking, an evangelist. Well, for years in doing evangelical work with churches, preaching on the street corner or in a church or anywhere that I went, people would tell me, that's evangelism you're doing, you're an evangelist. And I used to tell them, I prefer you wouldn't use that word. Because as carefully as I've ever looked through the Bible, I never found the word evangelist on the lips of Jesus. I'm not saying it's a bad word. You want to call yourself an evangelist? Be my guest. Me, I prefer not to. Always preferred not to, because I didn't see Jesus use that word. That doesn't mean it's wrong. I'm just trying to take only what I ever saw that he said. And he never used that word. I was surprised to hear yesterday that, where did he go? My friend here told me that he got a phone call from somebody who wanted to know my credentials. By what authority and power did I speak about Islam and Christianity? I was kind of surprised to hear that. The caller said he was a Christian. It's a very un-Christian thing to do. That's what the Jews and the Romans and so on used to ask about the disciples of Jesus. You find in Acts chapter 4, among other places, when the disciples would try to preach, the Romans or the Jews would say, by what authority do you preach? What school did you go to? You're just a fisherman. How do you dare to speak? So I'd hope that's not typical of most people, that they seem to think a Christian today has to be like a Pharisee. He has to go through the school and get a certificate and he's approved.